In 1998, South Korea's economy had just collapsed. The IMF wired $97 billion to keep the country solvent. That same year, the president Kim Dae-jung stood up and promised something strange. Korea would export culture. 25 years later, K-pop is a multi-billion-dollar industry, marketed everywhere as pure Korean identity. But open the songwriting credits on a BTS singing, and half the names are foreign. So who actually built this?
That's not a coincidence. That's the puzzle. A country sells its biggest cultural export as singularly Korean. And every time you look closer at the machinery behind it, the machinery turns out to be foreign. This isn't a fringe detail buried in liner notes. Two Swedish songwriters, Cassiopeia and Ellen Berg, working together as Sunshine, have writing credits on Twice, BTS, ITZY, and Enhypen. A third Swede, Alex Carlson, co-wrote a BTS single that hit #1 on Billboard. Korean industry reporters now casually describe the production process as composed in Sweden, recorded in Korea. And it's not just Sweden. American and British songwriters are now a near-permanent fixture in K-pop credits too, to the point where finding a major release with 0 overseas contributors has become the exception, not the rule.
That's not a collaboration. That's a supply chain. And supply chains have a country of origin problem. So, explanation 1. It's just globalized pop music. Every genre borrows collaborators. Nothing to see here.
Test it. Rewind further than the songwriting credits, back to where the whole system started. In the early 1980s, a failed Korean singer named Lee Soo-man gave up on music and moved to California to study computer engineering. He wasn't there for the entertainment industry. He was there for robotics. But while he was a graduate student, he watched Michael Jackson's Thriller take over MTV. And he watched what American labels did around that moment. Choreography treated as a science. Image treated as a product. An entire star built and marketed like an engineered object. Lee said later that he decided right there to replicate US entertainment in Korea. That's not a metaphor. That's the plan he wrote down.
He went home in 1985 with no music industry job waiting for him. He spent 4 years saving money as a radio DJ before he could even start. In 1989, he opened a small company called SM Studio. It wasn't until 1995 that it became SM Entertainment, the company you'd recognize today. And when he built its actual training system, he didn't invent it from the American model he'd admired. He copied a Japanese one instead, Johnny and Associates, founded in 1962 by Johnny Kitagawa, the agency that had already spent 3 decades perfecting multi-year trainee houses, systematic vocal and dance drilling starting in a performer's early teens, and debut only after years of invisible, unpaid labor, with the company recouping its training costs from the artist's future earnings. Lee took that exact structure and rebuilt it in Seoul. Every major agency that followed did the same thing. YG, JYP, Hybe. Different founders, different rosters, same blueprint. Girls' Generation, SHINee, EXO, BTS. Different companies, one shared pipeline underneath all of them. That's not 2 industries independently converging on the same idea. That's one country's businessman replicating another country's business model, wholesale, and an entire domestic industry standardizing around his copy.
That's not what organic borrowing looks like.
So try explanation 2. Fine, the system was copied, but the global appeal happened naturally, afterward, once the world discovered it on its own. Test that one too.
And to test it, you have to go back to what South Korea actually looked like in December of 1997. This wasn't a mild downturn. Foreign currency reserves ran out almost overnight. The won lost half its value in weeks. IMF negotiators moved into Seoul hotel conference rooms and dictated terms directly to the finance ministry. Household-made conglomerates went bankrupt within months, and mass layoffs hit a country that had spent 30 years telling its citizens that lifetime employment was the reward for national sacrifice. That promise broke in public, all at once.
In his 1998 inaugural address, delivered into exactly that wreckage, incoming President Kim Dae-jung told the country it would pour energy into globalizing Korean culture. It sounded almost absurd at the time, a nation renegotiating its sovereign debt, promising to sell pop music to the world.
His government's cultural budget went from $14 million to $84 million in 3 years. Broadcast quotas guaranteed Korean content stayed on Korean airwaves while the industry rebuilt. Tax incentives and public-private investment funds directed capital specifically at entertainment companies that, a year earlier, would have looked like the least essential businesses in the country to save. By 2020, cultural spending had grown to nearly 1.5% of the entire national budget, not as a cultural afterthought, but as a named line item in national economic planning, budgeted next to shipbuilding and semiconductors. And the timing kills the "it happened naturally" theory outright. HOT had already debuted in 1996. SES followed in 1997. The entertainment companies built the machine first, on their own, with private capital and a borrowed foreign blueprint, years before any government official treated it as policy. What the state did in 1998 wasn't invent an industry from nothing. It recognized one that was already quietly working and decided to fund its expansion at national scale. The policy came second, but once it arrived, it came with the full weight of the state behind it, and BTS didn't break globally until nearly 2 decades after that speech. Korean cultural exports were a rounding error in 1998. The global fandom came last, not first. 2 explanations tested. 2 eliminated. So what's actually going on? Here's the part nobody puts in one sentence. K-pop is a deliberately engineered export industry, assembled in 3 layers. A Japanese training model, adopted wholesale by a Korean businessman who'd studied American pop as his original template. Foreign songwriters, contracted at scale, credited openly and barely hidden. And Korean state investment, sustained for 25 years across 4 presidential administrations, that arrived only after the private sector prototype had already proven the model worked. All of it sold to the world as spontaneous, authentic Korean identity, not despite the engineering, but because of it. The authenticity isn't a contradiction of the strategy. The authenticity is the product being manufactured. That reframes the entire question. Because if a government can treat culture the same way it treats semiconductors, recognize a working private prototype, then plan it, fund it, import the components it needs, and export the finished branded good, then authentic national culture stops meaning what most of us assume it means. It's not something that rises up on its own from a people and gets discovered by the world. It can be built, the same way you'd build any other export industry, with the same deliberateness as a 5-year industrial plan. And once you see that in Korea, you start noticing it everywhere else too. Japanese anime's global licensing machine, Hollywood's decades of state-adjacent trade lobbying,
dressed up as pure entertainment. The line between organic culture and industrial policy wearing a costume gets a lot harder to draw than it looked 10 minutes ago. So, is K-pop Korean?
The honest answer is more unsettling than yes or no. It's Korean the way a product is made in a country. Designed, assembled and branded there, built from components sourced from anywhere the plan required. Maybe that's not a scandal. Maybe that's just what national culture looks like now, once a government decides to build it on purpose, and gets very good at making sure you never see the blueprint.